please. Our meeting's back in session, thank you. So, agenda item number 13, overhead allocation model. Janine is going to present to us on this wonderful subject.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this report is provided based on requests from committee meetings and general conversations, I guess, around council in terms of the costs that we see in terms of the cost to deliver our services and what they include around corporate overheads and how they're allocated using what's termed the burden rate. And so what I've tried to do is to set out, I guess, some of what we state in our annual plans and annual reports around our accounting policies, which state that indirect costs are charged to our significant activities using appropriate cost drivers, so that the cost that we reflect for that service delivery is fully inclusive of the effort that takes across the organisation to deliver that. As is illustrated in the diagram on page 77 of the agenda, there's effectively two key elements to the way that we move costs around in terms of our corporate overheads, corporate costs, which are for things such as finance, myself and my teams, people and capability, and information services. So that core capability within the organisation that supports all of the work that we do. Those costs are allocated to what we call management cost centres, which is a budget held by each director and section manager for the operation of their business. The overhead costs move to those cost centres based on an identified cost driver. They then accumulate in those management cost centres, which, as well as receiving the overhead, also incorporate costs associated with staff and business management and directorates. So that includes time and cost for training and development, for performance management, for team meetings and the like. And then those costs are allocated out to project or activity budgets based on the staff time from each of those section budgets that is spent on those activities. So as is noted there, I've set out in general terms under section 8 of the report the basis on which the overhead allocations are moved or allocated to those management cost centres. Predominantly that is on either headcount or number of staff, although in some areas we do utilise a percentage of time. So in relation to some of the services that my directorate provide, there is an assessment of how much effort goes into supporting each of the directorates, given it's not quite uniform in terms of the complexity and level of support that's required. And then under section 9, the calculation of the labour burden rate is set out there, which is effectively the total management cost centre costs divided by the total value of staff time that's charged out to those projects or deliverables. And so what we end up with is a burden rate as a cost that attaches to every dollar of staff time charged to those projects or deliverables. Those costs are variable, so the burden rate is calculated individually for every section, and they will vary depending on the share of corporate overhead costs that have been allocated, the balance of staff time between management activities and those project and deliverables, and also the value of any direct costs that may be held within the management budgets of those sections. So for this year, just noting there that the labour burden rates range from 69 cents for every dollar of labour up to $2 for every dollar of labour with the average being $1.32. Hopefully that, sorry.
So. Questioners from sorry.
So I
So
jumped the
Noel,
gun.
you can go first.
I jumped the gun and Robbie's a member of the committee, but
you go
okay,
first.
okay, so Robbie and I have noticed and have raised this issue previously that in a number of examples that have come before us in the ICM space, for every dollar that we invest in work, it costs more than $1 and up to $1.47, I think was the highest I've seen so far with the overheads. So it costs more in getting the work done than it does actually doing the work, if I can put it in those simple terms. So this burden and the dropping of costs from the chief executive down through the whole organisation for getting a drain cleaned, whilst I understand the concept, it's unaffordable. So going forward, how is that intended to be addressed? Or is that something for ICM and the LTP? And I don't know whether I've captured that sufficiently, Robbie, but you have a go after me if you like. It is a real concern to the landowners, to us as councillors, that it's costing more to support the delivery than actually the delivery. So I'll give you the opportunity. Thank you.
Sure.
That's a perfectly legitimate question, but it's not the question that this report set out to address. This is about how do we allocate the overheads amongst the organisation. What you're talking about is that $1.40, whatever you said it was, in line with other organisations, or are we excessive or whatever, you know? That's two different questions.
Well,
Maybe
the model is the issue.
It is, and I understand exactly where Noel's coming from.
Did you get where I was saying that?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely, and it's the model that is the issue rather than the specific numbers, because it's delivering a certain cost outcome at the moment, which is not able to be sustained by the catchment. So it's
The model of which would work rather than, because if you're saying it's the model, you're suggesting that ICM is shouldering an unfair portion of the overheads compared to other directorates, which isn't what I heard you say.
Well, it doesn't encapsulate that.
Yeah.
I'd let you know, I'm not going to get involved in this because I don't see the cost getting to what goes out to the other directors. I think Janine's the only person that can in this room who can answer that question.
So I think I would observe that the model has been applied consistently for a long period of time. So I guess I'm interested whether how that rate has changed over time. In terms of, is it something that's new or is it a new focus in terms of cost of delivery? First question. I think in saying $1.47 for every dollar of labour, it's important to know where those costs are actually being driven from, because I think the assumption is leapt to that it is the corporate cost that is driving it, but I'm not sure if it is. And I think that's probably the first port of call to go, what is the share of those corporate costs that those functions are receiving, and is that a problem? Because proportionately, again, across our total organisational expenditure, corporate costs have not increased as a proportion of our total spend over the last 6 years. They've stayed not saying they've decreased, but they haven't outstripped the increases in costs across the organisation. So how much of it is being driven by corporate activities versus how much of it might be being driven by that oversight that is sitting within ICM budgets themselves, and that split between what we're having to do to manage a function versus what we're having to do to actually deliver a function. And those are things that we can look at and tease apart to understand exactly where is that cost being driven from.
Can I suggest, and I'm sorry, No,
That's
but
right.
what I'd like to see, because we've got a specific example, which is the one that I think you were talking about. What I'd like to see is a breakdown of we know what the contractor's costs are. I'd like to see a breakdown of the other costs by department. That's possible, must be possible. So we can actually identify where those incremental cost increases are being applied.
And just for the committee's information, I put in a request possibly 3 months ago now to understand the costs associated with consents and the activities of ICM. And it's been very interesting it's taken an inordinate sense of time and effort to extract that information from the organisation and still yet, but I think Greg's close to getting that to me, I'm hoping. But it's just showing that there is huge costs in the consenting areas for ICM. And, you know, Janine's, I think we're on the same track. We need to understand
where it's
where
coming
it
from.
really is costing the landowners. But it is, I've always thought it's the model, but once we get those examples, maybe we could, through the LTP or whatever it's appropriate, to look at whether that model is still fit for purpose. Because 4 years ago, when these committees went out of existence, the biggest concern that was being raised by the flood and drainage committees was the cost structure. And I know the then director of ICM wanted us to go away because we were raising too many questions about the costs.
Yeah, and I guess there's the understanding of it. There is the principle of equity, of just because we don't like the answer doesn't mean it's not the right answer.
Yeah, but unless we understand.
We need to understand where that's coming from and where our ability to influence that answer actually sits.
Exactly
So what
so.
are the levers that we need to pull?
So I'll leave it.
So,
I'm happy to take that specific example and dig through it.
Robbie, did I see you have your hand up a short while ago?
Yeah. It's still the issue is how we can get to a figure of for every dollar spent, there's a cost of $2.06. And
That's an extreme.
but
That's
I
an
know
outlier.
it might be the extreme, but it's somehow gets to that number. And we've got ratepayers out there that, you know, if that's the sort of cost that can happen, the way we're doing business is unaffordable and it cannot continue. And just in the system of when the barge turns up and to manage the barge, if we've got a cost structure that every staff member on that barge is getting paid 3 times, the cost of having that person operate the barge is 3 times greater than what it is to employ them, there's a real issue that barge is unaffordable with our method of how we use it. And that's where digging into some of this is showing operational wise, that we'd be better allowing a private company to operate because they would not be operating under that cost structure. And that's the serious issue we've got here, that this is unaffordable. We may actually have to start taking work out of ICM's hands and put it into private enterprises because we cannot continue down this cost structure because it is far too expensive. And that's where I'm getting to with that. If I'd actually like you to go away and actually either was as simple as doing an ICM meeting of the scheme and seeing what it costs to have staff in the room that day to have a 3 or 4 hour meeting of what it actually costs ICM under that budget, and to show us exactly how it works. So then we can totally understand how that cost structure works on just a meeting day.
Well,
Anyway.
What I've asked Janine to do, Robbie, is on that $30,000 drainage contract, if we can understand the layers of cost on there that builds it up to the 62,000 that was charged to the catchment. I think that's a place to start from. If we can get that, then we can sit down and understand, is it the model that needs changing and addressing, or is there something else that we can do which will allow those costs to be reined in? We're not going to solve this here, but we need more information to be able to determine the way forward.
And I think the important bit is that this model is applied consistently across the organisation. So while there's a keen focus around the catchment management activities, exactly the same model applies to all of the work that we're doing. So it is needing to understand where those input drivers are coming from, because that's where the cost is actually being driven, rather than how we're allocating it, although having confidence in that allocation is important as well.
Yeah, that's how it appears to me. It's not the divvying up across the organisation. It's yeah. And look, I'm supportive of what you're wanting to do, and I guess the other part that I think is important, and I don't know how realistic it is, Janine, is whether it's through what they call the River Managers Group. I think. Are there any other councils around the country that have done this work, so we can have a little bit of a benchmarking process? And that's one issue. The other issue is, as you say, Robbie, how do we compare to if we go to private enterprise? And I mean, and let's be honest, that this issue applies to the difference between doing a job yourself versus any other organisation. It's no different to the minimum charge at local engineering shop. You say to me, look, you're better off to do that yourself if you've got a welder, because I've got to charge $100 just the minute it walks in the door, sort of thing, you know, because I've got overheads. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm sitting.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. No further questions. So the resolution that the report overhead allocation model finance Service Committee 27 November be received. Thanks, Mikhail. Robbie, thank you. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, Janine, for your effort on that. I know it's probably going to be an ongoing issue, but it's one that does need to be addressed. So,
Okay, we'll peel the onion one layer at a time.
thank you.
Mr. Chairman, for me, this model was put in place some time ago. My real question is it still fit for purpose? Because I think we need to look at that regularly, you know, not every 5 minutes, but over time. Is it still fit for purpose? What has moved and what needs adjusting?
Look, I hear what you're saying, Noel. We also, you'll have seen the policy statements that have come out Friday. This issue is going to be addressed there as well. So it's quite timely in terms of, I think it's timely anyway, in terms of considering all the issues together and is the model fit for purpose going forward. Okay, Janine, Councillor Chief Executive and Director expenses for the quarter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So happy to take this report as read. This is our regular reporting into this committee, which just provides that transparency across elected member as well as executive expenses.
Thank you. I didn't see any outliers in those reports, and unless anybody else has. Stu, you have, obviously.
Well, I don't know until I ask a question about whether there are outliers. I was just curious how Graf's mileage and travel time was so high, because I thought he lived in Hamilton. So that's just one, but and I just found it a bit odd. What else did I see here? Even my mileage seemed blooming high on the second graph, the one with the mileage there, compared to the likes of Mikhail and those ones, because it can't be bringing in the previous year yet, can it?
This should just be for the first quarter.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even Warren's is half of mine.
Warren stays down here.
Oh, okay. Oh,
So
maybe
do
it's right then, yeah.
you want to have launch an inquiry into the mileage?
No, I don't think it's worth an inquiry, but yeah.
Well,
I can certainly check yours to make sure that it's
Yeah.
Accurate.
okay.
The numbers should be coming off any of your expense claims that are.
Yeah, I'm bloody
that are
slack.
made,
I'm
so-
about 3 months overdue at the moment.
There we are. See, that's why yours is so low.
It's high, that's my point. That's
Because the last one was put in this quarter or the last 6 months.
It's not actually this quarter, it's the last 6
Here,
months.
this is probably last year's total. Okay, so Ove, thank you. Seconder, Robbie, thanks. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thanks. Out of order.
Sorry. That all goes into burden rates, does it? I was just asking a question.
Oh, bloody lot goes in.
Yes.
You're paying for it.
$3,000 over 200 million.
It's not,
That would be, so.
and recovered in accordance with the model that's been explained to you. Well,
The question here.
if you, Councillor Cookson might come up with a more equitable model if he wants to apply himself to it.
I should administer it on my
Can you turn your mic off, please, Robbie?
I hate to think what the central government one looks like. And someone's here, there and everywhere.
Exactly. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the tenders board awarded contracts. It's been circulated. You don't intend talking to it? I've got some questions
just
on it.
happy to take it as read. Again, this is provided for transparency and accountability.
Okay, I noticed in there's some contracts which have been extended, contract variations, services, freshwater policy review, 2 of them, for quite considerable sums of money. And I'd like to question why we're doing that. Firstly, we're spending a lot of money on consultants from out of town by the look of it. And secondly, is there a way that we can remove ourselves from those contracts if what I hear is correct? This policy is no longer going to be required for national delivery review.
So if I answer the last part of that question first, yes, all of our contracts have termination or exit provisions within them. So that has a notice period associated with it, but there is absolutely the ability for council to terminate those contracts should that be required. In terms of the actual work program, there have been discussions with staff, and I know there has been an email sent out by the Director of Science Policy and Information this morning to the team to acknowledge that there is the need for some cooling down in activity in this space. I wouldn't say a complete stop at this point in time. I think the advice is that there are still have some statutory provisions that do need to be considered. Even if it is a reversion to the RMA, there are still requirements in there. I think the understanding is that it will take some time for the new government to formulate what those new provisions may be. And I understand some signal sent that they will take time to do that properly. So staff are really cognizant of that shift, and I think taking actions to try and reflect that while acknowledging that there may not be a complete stop of work at this point in time, but definitely a rescoping of work and a slowing of what is being done while we're waiting for that government direction.
Thank you, Janine. Mikhail.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I endorse everything that you've said. And have we got the staff capability to take up that slack that we need to comply with the statutory, requirements? So that's my only question. That to do not the bare minimum, but to just do what's required of us through legislation.
Thanks, Mikhail. My understanding is that the legislation is going to be, the current legislation is going to be rescinded, and the responsibility for these policies will be removed back to the councils responsible for the areas. And we have got, already we've got plans in place with the plan change 1. And there's a whole discussion that will have to take place about that. But at the moment, it seems inappropriate that we should be continuing with the freshwater policy discussions.
I don't know if I'd go that far with respect, because we're still going to be required to deliver on our obligations in terms of fresh water. I agree with you that what that looks like may well be different outside of the Waikato Waipo catchments. It's not going to change in the Waikato. Well, part of me is quite happy in the sense that we get rid of that extra complication of that national freshwater stuff over and above what we're doing with PC1, but we're still going to have to do something. We're always intending to do something with the rest of the catchments. Just quite what that looks like. I mean, we with a bit of luck, we'll have the ability to set a more realistic pace of change than what we will be required to do under this process. You know, so yeah, that would be my comment. Just people, I have no doubt that Tracy will be looking very closely to expedite this year, but.
Yeah, and as I say, there is communication that has been provided to staff involved in this morning, just to acknowledge that shift and the need to understand what the road forward actually looks like.
Okay, you had a question?
Oh, yeah, just that. I think that's the big thing, is just to look at those contractors, external contractors that were coming in. If we can do without those, and as I said, we've got the staff capability to carry on what we need to do for legislation.
Is there a document out from the government yet that kind of, because I've just seen bits and pieces of headlines, but it's kind of quite hard to work out and even know if they've actually landed on what they're going to do yet?
There is a policy document that they've you know, like
it's quite high level though, isn't it?
Absolutely, but I've had communications with somebody who's quite close to one of the ministers, and this person's on another council, and they've been told to stop everything. Wait until after Christmas.
Stop everything seems extreme. But...
So anyway,
Yeah,
look,
so
we are obviously we're responding in what I consider to be an appropriate manner, doing the minimum, put it on the back burner until we have clear direction from Wellington as to what we should be doing.
Chairman, if I may, have we heard from the Chief Executive what he's intending to do with staff, or is that something for us to discuss with him at the earliest opportunity?
I did. I stepped beyond my authority on Friday, I guess it was, in asking Tracy whether we should be continuing with the workshop, the freshwater workshop this week, and I guess I was put in my place, and I apologise to the chair of the relevant committee about that. So I haven't heard from the Chief Executive, I haven't spoken to him, so I can't answer the question. I think he was out of town on Friday, was certainly engaged, and he's out of town today, so you know.
But maybe we should ask him to attend the workshop if he can.
Yep.
Yes, the workshop's next week, isn't it?
Next week, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think probably the content of that workshop is being reviewed in terms of the new government and direction. But I think Tracy is still keen to at least have the opportunity for some time for a conversation to take place.
Yep. Thanks. Robbie.
I've spoken to the CEO about it. I've got a meeting with him tomorrow or Wednesday. Whenever he's got time, he's away in Tokoroa today. So I definitely wanted to speak to him about this, and we spoke over the weekend about it. And he is definitely interested in where we sit as a council, as a group. And yeah, it's what do we, you know, there's policy documents out, but there's nothing in writing yet. So that's the issue, is where the time it's going to take for them to implement what they've said, and then we can take direction directly from that, or do we need to get a member of parliament here saying what's going on, and then that helps to give us direction. That's the decision that, I don't know, it's going to be, there's a lot to happen in that space. And
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah, that
that's
was-
the problem, and how we react to it in terms of the staff. 5 days in long-term planning last week, and it could all change.
And I think the challenge is obviously for us, but nationally as well, in terms of across the sector, the amount of certainty that we actually have to be able to do long-term planning. And sort of discussing before the meeting, I know there has been engagement with DIA around what might options look like in that space, but no firm response. And so I think that conversation is not limited to freshwater, obviously.
No, no.
It's sort of front and centre now, but it is a much broader conversation, across everything that the council's doing, and how much certainty do we have in that, and how do we run a ruler over that quite quickly. Not just the new stuff through the LTP, but actually our existing baseline activities as well.
Thank you, Janine.
Yeah.
I'm assuming,
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Please.
I just never got to finish. I'm supportive of the chair and Councillor Downer of that we need to push pause or whatever possibilities there are to not cost our ratepayers any more than what they need to get their best outcome possible at the moment. I'm not saying we to let water degrade, but we need to be able to understand where the future sits, and I think we just need a pause in that place to understand where the next steps are to come, without just bowling forward and doing work that doesn't need to be done. So yeah, thank you.
Okay. June.
I'm assuming the regional sector group and LGNZ will be cognizant of this dilemma that all councils are facing, and I'd like to think they'll give us a bit of leadership on stuff, because otherwise it could be quite messy with different councils interpreting things different ways. Yeah, and the thing that bloody annoys me the most from these sort of processes is that they're going to change a whole bunch of stuff. There's going to be some stuff we have done that's going to be thrown out that still could add value to whatever the new government's going to end up with, and making sure we get the most we can out of the expense we've incurred, which is the challenging thing, yeah. And they're not going to throw something out and then decide in 12 months' time, oh shit, that part of it was actually all right, we shouldn't have biffed that out, sort of style, Because
I agree, Stu, but we're not saying to throw things out. All we're doing is saying, please push pause to understand what is coming. Yeah.
Okay, so we had that little discussion. Are we happy? We've got a resolution. Tenders, board awarded contracts. Can I have a mover, please? So Robbie and Stu seconder. All in favour? Thank you. Carried. All right, so we're moving forward onto the Waikato Local Authority Shared Services Annual Report. Janine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So
93 is page.
yes, page 93. So this is the annual report for the 22-23 financial year for Waikato Local Authority Shared Services, trading as CoLab. So this is the shared services CCO operating across councils within the Waikato region, and the report for the year, which is provided for the information of the committee.
Thank you, Janine. I hope everybody's read it in detail. Well, thank you. I actually did read it yesterday. Look, my only comments on it, according to their reporting, they are delivering value for money, and we have to take them at their word. We've got no way of proving it one way or the other. The only person I can rely on to confirm that for us would be our Finance and Business Services Manager. So I'd look for that comfort from Janine. Other than that, yeah, like I sense a degree of frustration in there that they're unable to get buy-in across the region for the deliverance of some of the services. But where they are being involved with assisting with the tendering processes. They seem to be delivering value for money. I assume the people that they're assisting are paying on an as used basis rather than a shared cost basis. But apart from that, I really can't comment further on CoLab and their activities.
So through you, Mr. Chair, perhaps if I can share some observations. So absolutely the point that you've picked up around the establishment and operation of what's called the Professional Services Panel is probably for us one of the key areas of benefit, both in terms of the certainty around pre-negotiated contract rates with those contractors and consultants, with identified discounts in terms of their open market rates. But from a staff perspective, the ease of being able to contract with any of those providers, which just reduces the amount of time that staff have to put into open tender processes or anything like that. So it's effectively an instruction for service and can be implemented very easily. The other areas of benefit that we have seen, obviously we have an insurance collective that has operated through CoLab for a number of years, and that gives us a good, I guess, mitigation of risks for ourselves. We go in with all other councils in the region, and so you get a diversification of the risk rather than a concentration around our own risk profile. And the other area is, which is new, probably in the last 12 months in terms of learning and development opportunities. So building a suite of standard online learning and development offerings that can participate in. I think we do have, and we bring it to the attention of CoLab. I guess we had the opportunity for some of their senior staff to present to the executive a couple of weeks ago. We do face two ways when it comes to looking at shared services or collaboration. There's what we can achieve locally through CoLab, but there is also the opportunity that we have with shared services with other regional councils, which is probably the more substantial area for us where we look at that collaboration. And so that's through Regional Software Holdings Limited that we achieve that collaboration with across the regional sector as well.
Okay, thanks, Janine. Michael, question.
Yeah, Janine, I was wondering why, and you might not know or could give a bit of insight on why some of the other TAs don't join up. Tobal District Council sold its shares to Western Bay Plenty. Did they give any feedback on why, or?
I think they have probably felt a closer affiliation to
Bay Plenty.
Bay Plenty. And I think that's that. I'm not aware of any underlying reason other than that I think they do look to the Bay more so probably than to the Waikato.
So what would be the main reasons why TAs don't join up with CoLab? Is it they don't think they can get that regional benefit, or sorry, the provincial benefit?
Yeah, I'm probably not well placed to speak on behalf of the other councils. I think there tends to be a lot of interaction and collaboration around the larger councils. It is more difficult, I think, for some of the smaller ones where they just don't have the number of staff, or staff are doing 3 different jobs already to actually be able to step into some of that collaboration. And yet there's I guess a lot of opportunity for them potentially there with it. But I think it's just the resource constraint as much as anything.
Thanks.
The services that are provided that some of those councils don't actually need. So,
Yeah.
All right. So, Janine, thanks for that that answer and that overview. Much appreciated. Robbie, you've got a question.
I think some of the councils are frustrated. Some that are in there, and some that aren't in. There's equal frustration of what the outcomes and what benefits there are. And I think there's a bit of underlying that it's Hamilton centric. There's going to be no benefit to the outer region for joining. So what I hear in one or two of my TAs, there's a lot of that getting said.
Okay, thanks, Robbie. All right, we have a resolution. We've still have a quorum in the room, so we have a mover, please. Robbie, thanks, Mikhail. All in favour? Aye, carried. Right, we're getting close to the end, so just a bit of patience. So we have the Civic Financial Services half-yearly accounts. Janine, once again, your name seems beside everything.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So these are noted for the information of the committee. As is highlighted in the report, so we have a very minor interest in Civic Financial Services of about $20,000 for our 0.2% interest, but being an investment that we do have a stake in, these are provided for your information.
Thanks very much. I take it there's no questions. We have a resolution to be moved, seconded. All in favour? Aye. Yes, carried. Thank you. Are you complaining? All right. Agenda item number 18, and you can toss it between yourself, or would you like me to?
I'm happy to.
Okay, thank Janine. We'll close the meeting with a karakia. Thank you.
Unahia mai te ure tapanui, kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te hininaro. I te ara takatū, koe rā e rongo, e whakaria aki ki runga, kia tina, tina, haumi e, hui e, tae ki e.
Thank you, Janine. I'd like to thank people for their attendance and call the meeting to a close. Thank you.